Hello and welcome to this session on business research methodology. Today we'll be touching upon chapter 2, that's business research design process. I'm your instructor Rajesh Durbala and I'm an assistant professor in business analytics and research methodology. So this is the brief outlook of today's session. The learning objectives, that is, we'll understand the steps in conducting research, then we'll understand the types of research, learn the purpose and methods of conducting exploratory research, learn about descriptive research and types of descriptive research, have a preliminary idea about causal research, then establish a difference between exploratory research, descriptive research and causal research. Okay, so let's move ahead. This is going to be interesting. Now, research is all about finding something, the absence of which may distort or our ability to take informed decisions. Okay, so what are we going to do is we are just going to listen to, or we are going to just understand what people have done and what they feel about research. Okay, this is not much very important for your learning, but this will definitely give you a feel of the subject. So let's see what Voka and other people in 2009, what have they said about research. They say research is all about finding something. Okay, they are talking about finding something, and if we are not aware, that is to say, they say the absence of which may distort the ability to take informed decisions. So if that doesn't exist, our decision taking ability would be distorted. The second point that is mentioned is the ability to take an informed decision is generated through a systematic study that is conducted through various interrelated stages. We had discussed this exactly in the previous lecture. All the steps in a research are interrelated and no independent activity is launched without considering the decisions on the previous stage. So I can say it's a process. One step leads to the other. It cannot be done in isolation. And one has to really understand that from problem identification to presentation of findings, every step is interlinked and interrelated. So the emphasis of this entire slide is that all the steps are interrelated. You cannot conduct a step before you have analyzed previous steps, unless you have understood the outcomes of the previous step. So based on the outcomes of the previous step, you design what your forthcoming step is going to be. So this is the business research process design. So any good researcher or any good research is conducted using these 10 steps, some of which we have studied earlier. That is, number one, problem or opportunity identification. The first thing is you have to understand or identify the problem. So unless you are aware of the problem, what we are dealing with, there's no point going ahead with this, right? And second is decision maker and the business researcher meeting to discuss the problem and opportunity dimensions. In if the researcher and the decision maker are working in isolation, they do not have a consensus over the problem, then there would be two diametrically opposite approaches towards the problem, which is not at all feasible for the health and well-being of the organization. So the researcher as well as the decision maker, they need to meet and come onto the common page where they understand the problem in a unified manner. Then defining the management problem and subsequently the research problem. This is one, that is to say the management has to understand the problem the same way as well as the researcher has to understand the problem in the same way. Formal research proposal and introducing the dimensions of the problem. You have to prepare a formal proposal, okay, and then you have to introduce the dimensions of the problem. What are the various dimensions and aspects of the problem are to be elucidated. Then approaches to research. You have to define what are the various approaches that you are going to follow in your research work. Then field work and data collection. Obviously you have to either collect primary data or a secondary data. But data, without data you cannot take an informed decision. Performing data analysis. Once you have collected and prepared the data, now you perform your analysis using some sophisticated tools. Then interpretation of results and presentation of the findings. You interpret the results and present the findings. Then finally the management has to decide or make a decision and then implement the decision. So these are some 10 steps which are obvious, but they are inevitable. You have to execute them in sequence, or else you may miss out on a very important aspect of the research process. So this is the entire research process design. You can see the various steps. Most of it are self-explanatory. You can pause the video and make a note of these steps as well. Okay. Step 1 says problem or opportunity identification. Step 2 says decision maker and business researcher meeting to discuss the problem and opportunity. So you can see all these 10 steps are the same that we had discussed in the previous slide. That's this slide. Okay. You can see these 10 steps are the same as the 10 steps over here. You can pause the video and definitely make a note of these steps. I'm moving further. So let us discuss one problem at a time, or one step at a time. So first is problem or opportunity identification, as we have discussed in the previous lecture as well. Okay, you may have problems, you may have opportunities. You cannot waste time in identifying and diagnosing them. Okay, so you have to identify them as soon as possible. Then the decision maker and the business researcher meeting to discuss the problem or opportunity dimensions. The decision maker contacts the business research firm and then discusses the problem or opportunity with the business researcher. Now many a times, many of the companies and firms, they seek the help of professional research organizations like AC Nielsen or BCG or McKinsey. So these firms, they need to meet the researcher in order to understand what this is, what the problem is. The researcher can only suggest solution to a problem, but the actual decision is taken by the decision maker, right? This is very, very important. So it's not necessary that whatever the researcher presents as a solution, the decision maker has to accept it. The decision maker has the discretion to take whichever course of action he or she feels most apt and suitable. So the decision maker has the autonomy to take a decision. So they can only seek the help of any research firm. Then step 3, defining the management problem and subsequently the research problem. The management problem is concerned with the decision maker and is action oriented in nature. So for example, the management problem offers a psychological pricing to enhance the quantum of sales. This management research problem focuses on the assumptions. So let us say, for example, Bata prices its products at, let us say, ending with 9. Let us say it's 1499. Why not 1500? Maybe this is a psychological pricing which compels the people to think it's some 1400 something. Okay, they won't believe, they won't feel it's a 1500 product. For them, it's 14 something product. Okay, so psychologically they are in a mindset or a frame of mind which makes them feel that they are paying literally 100 less, but in fact what they are doing is they are just paying 1 rupee less than 1500. So that this could be a management problem, but the same thing could be in the form of a research problem that is somewhat information oriented and focuses mainly on the causes and not on the symptoms. Like a research problem, they try to get deeper into the problem. They are not just concerned about the peripheral or superficial issues. They want to get deeper and deeper. This is to determine the consumer's opinion on psychological pricing and to estimate their purchase behavior for the psychological price being offered. So they will just not feel that psychological behavior or the psychological pricing can affect sales. They will try to understand how this psychological pricing plays with the minds of the consumer and compels them to buy more. Step 4, the formal research proposal and introducing the dimensions to the problem. Now the researcher prepares a formal proposal to the research and develops the approaches to research problem. The first part is to develop a theoretical model to quantify an attitude. Okay, so what we are trying to understand is the in the fourth step, the researcher creates a formal proposal of research. Okay, and then he tries to propose the research methodology, the objectives, and how the research would be carried out. So they will prepare a framework and present it to the client, that is the organization. For example, let us say to estimate the buying intentions for a particular product, first the researcher has to prepare a theoretical model to measure an attitude like buying intentions. Okay, so they will have to prepare a model in order to understand what are the buying intentions and what are the buying intentions motivated by. Now, for example, a theoretical model could look something like this. Okay, the main variables could be the brand image could be impacting the buying intention, maybe the brand awareness, maybe the price, maybe the availability or after sales services. And the moderating variables could be age, gender, and income. So, brand image could be influenced by the age, right? For me, a brand could look or feel something different, and for a woman, it could feel something else. So these are moderating factors. So I create a theoretical model to understand. Okay. Then what we do, or what does a researcher do during the proposal formation, is again create the hypothesis. This part's a form of methodology. Now hypothesis could be one of the hypotheses could be brand image has significant linear impact on the buying intentions. Similarly, the brand awareness has a significant linear impact on the buying intentions. Price has a significant linear impact on the buying intentions, or availability has a significant linear impact on buying intention. And fifth hypothesis, after sales services has a significant linear impact on buying intentions. So these are certain hypotheses which could be framed based on theoretical model that we saw in the previous slide. That's this. Okay, you can see brand image, brand awareness, price, availability, after sales service. So these main variables form the main composition of my hypothesis. Then the researcher can also test the combined impact of these 5 variables on buying intentions. The proposed multi-regression model, okay, will be somewhat like this. Buying intention could be B0 plus B1, that is brand image, plus B2, that could be brand awareness, plus B3, that is price, plus B4, that is availability, plus B5, that is after sales. And the sixth hypothesis, the next hypothesis that could be framed is all the 5 factors in combination have a significant linear impact on buying intentions. Okay, so what we are trying to do is 5 of the hypotheses are talking about impacting the buying intentions independently, and one of the hypotheses says cumulatively all these 5 factors would contribute to buying intentions. Step 5, approaches to research. The research approach is formulated in the next step. How are we going to conduct? In the light of type of data, questions are framed and scientifically placed in a questionnaire. So what kind of a data do I need? So based on the type of data that's required for my study, I would place those questions scientifically onto my questionnaire. Now this chapter is based on the research design formulation. Okay, so in chapter 3 that will deal with the measurement and scaling, and chapter 4 with the aspect of the questionnaire design, and then we'll study about the sample and the sampling techniques in chapter 5. Moving ahead, what are the various types of research? Now this is going to be very, very important. Pay careful attention to it. All researchers can be broadly classified into 3 groups, that is exploratory research, descriptive research, and causal research. Okay, these 3 methods differ in terms of different aspects of conducting the research. Let's see what they are. Now I know there are exploratory, descriptive, and causal. Descriptive can be further classified as cross-sectional research or longitudinal research. What is exploratory research? As the name suggests, okay, exploratory research is just to explore. We just want to add more and more knowledge. We want to add to the body of knowledge. We are just trying to absorb as much of knowledge or information that could be gathered about a specific problem or a specific opportunity. Okay, so let's see what it's. As the name indicates, exploratory research is mainly used to explore the insight of the general research problem. I need to feel the problem. I need to understand what the problem is all about. Okay, so I'm not getting deeper into it. I'm not going to get to know what is causing the problem, but I need to understand the problem in its totality. This is used for the following purposes. Okay, we are trying to obtain the background information. Number 2, research problem formulation or defining it more precisely. Number 3, identifying and defining the key research variables. And number 4, developing the hypothesis. Okay, so this is the beginning of the research. That's I'm trying to just investigate what is my problem, what is the problem. Okay, understand my problem. I want to just pinpoint my problem. I want to understand the origin or the background of any the, any background information that I have about my problem. Similarly, I want to define my research problem more precisely, then I want to identify the key variables, then I would develop my hypothesis. That's what is exploratory research. Now let's see. As we have already seen, these are the this kind of a model that was defined in the previous slides. Now I'm going to redefine it. I'm just making some more changes to it. Okay, now I have two more: store employee behavior and location of the store. Now maybe it could be possible that I tried to dig deeper into the problem and I could find two more variables through exploratory research. Okay, okay. Now these are the various methods of conducting exploratory research. One is secondary data analysis, expert survey, focus group interviews, depth interviews, case analysis, projective techniques. So remember these are very important. These are the 6 various steps or methods of conducting exploratory research. Let us see in detail. Secondary data analysis. Now any research, any data that is already with us through previous researchers conducted, we analyzed such kind of a data, and that's called secondary data analysis. Okay, we'll discuss this topic exclusively in chapter 6. Then expert survey. What we try to do is we visit some of the experts in this domain or in this subject, or who have done a great amount of work in the subject, who have reputation in the market, their knowledge is authentic. Okay, their work is corroborated by many of the leading bodies or agencies. So we approach such kind of a people and conduct a lot of surveys and interviews through them to obtain a lot of knowledge about the problem in hand that we have. So that forms expert survey. Now focus group interviews. A focus group interview is a qualitative research technique in which a trained moderator leads a small group of participants to an unstructured discussion about the topic of interest. Okay, now let us say I just want to understand how the design of vehicles, the automobiles or cars of Ford could be improved. So what I can do is I can invite some of my existing Ford customers and ask them to discuss about the various features of the car. Okay, and I, being a moderator, I would just guide their discussion. I won't involve, or I won't skew their discussion. I would just give them prompts and allow an unbiased discussion to understand what they feel about the designing aspects of Ford. So you have to understand this is a qualitative research technique. So the researcher has to compile all the data as it is. Then depth interviews. So these depth interviews require a very highly skilled interviewer, because it is done through probing questions. The questions are probing in nature, and what they do is the respondent is from a target population of so we have a target population and we pick respondents from there, and through probing questions we try to dig out some underlying opinions, motivations or emotions or feelings of an individual respondent on a topic. Okay, generally coined by the researcher. These are depth interviews. So you have to remember, the interviews are probing in nature. Then we have case analysis. In case analysis, the case study research method actually combines the record analysis and observations from individual and group interviews. The case studies become particularly useful when one needs to understand some particular problem or situation in great depth, and when one can identify the cases rich in information. Okay, see, simply what we try to do is, case study is just a documentation of the entire problem and what the situation is all about. So once the detailed documentation is read, analyzed and studied, again a lot of insights could be available about the problem in hand. Then projective techniques. Projective technique is achieved by presenting the respondents with ambiguous verbal or visual stimulus materials such as bubble cartoons, which they need to make sense of by drawing from their own experiences, thoughts, feelings and imaginations before they can offer a response. Now these are very abstract, okay, in which, let us say, a researcher may come up with a cartoon and a bubble would be there. You may be asked to fill the dialogues, maybe whatever the cartoon character may be saying. So these are very abstract, okay. They want to create or capture your thought process, okay. They are not exactly asking you a straightforward question, but it would be formed in the form of an word association or a completion task, construction task or an expressive task. So these kind of things would be given to you, based on which the researcher collects and compiles the data. Then we have two types of projective techniques. One is word associations and completion tasks. Now what do you mean by word association is, you are shown a picture maybe and you may be asked to just say one single word. So based on the word that you utter, that becomes like the researcher would try to understand whether you have a positive opinion about the picture or a negative opinion. Similarly, completion tasks, maybe a sentence would be given to you and the basic emotion is left blank. So you may have to fill the reason or your emotion in the blank. For example, I use close up because I find it fresh, I find it red, or I like the color, I like the taste. So when I fill that element, so what I'm doing is I'm expressing my emotions or reasons. That is completion task. The other projective techniques could be construction task. Construction task, the respondent is provided with less initial structure as compared with the completion task, where the respondent is provided with an initial structure and then he or she completes it. Okay, so in construction task, what they simply do is, in the field of business research, third person questioning or bubble drawing are two commonly used construction techniques. Okay, as I told you in the beginning, there would be a bubble drawing, like a cartoon with a bubble would be there and you are expected to fill that bubble. So the kind of cues that are offered to you are much less as compared to the completion task. Then expressive task. Expressive technique, the respondents are asked to role play, act. Okay, so this is an expressive task. Now the second type of a research, that is descriptive research. Now in this descriptive research, what you do is you describe the business or market characteristics. The descriptive research mainly answers who, what, when, where and how kind of a questions. It attempts to address who should be surveyed, what, at what time, okay, for where, from whom. Okay, these kind of questions could be answered. Now it could be classified as cross-sectional study or a longitudinal study. A cross-sectional study, what we do is we try to study collection of information from a sample of population at only one point of a time. I just do a study of a population over a broad population within a single time frame. Okay, So that is one very very important thing that you have to remember. And in cross-sectional data, we usually require large volume of sample cannot be small. Okay, in longitudinal, on the flip side, you make a study on the same population over a period of time. Okay, it's not just in one single time, you do it over a period of time. Now there is a well defined difference between cross-sectional study and a longitudinal study. That is, in a longitudinal study, the sample remains the same over a period of time. In a cross-sectional design, a representative sample taken from the population is studied at only one point of time. Okay, that's very very important that you have to keep it in mind. That is, in a longitudinal study, you study on the same population over a prolonged period of time, whereas in a cross-sectional study, you have to study on a representative sample, and that's just studied at one single point of time. Causal research, this is the third type of research. Now in causal research is conducted to identify the cause and effect relationship. Okay, what is causing a problem? So you have to understand that. So that is what is causal research. Now what we try to understand is the cause and effect relationship between two or more business variables, like what is the relationship between ad spend and sales. Many business decisions are based on the causal relationships between the variables of interest. As discussed, like the descriptive research is able to answer who, what, when, where and how kind of a questions, but not why part of a question. Causal research is designed to address the why part. Okay, so very important, remember that. So these are the summary table. You can just pause the recording and you can make a note, or you can just make notes from this table. This is a summary of all the different type of research that we have studied, that is exploratory research, descriptive research, conclusive research. Okay, now it will just give you what is the objective, what is the problem, the structure method, and the research findings. All these things you have to study. Okay, now the sixth is fieldwork and data collection. So again, I'm just giving you an overview, like chapter 6 would be giving you a lot of information about how you can design your research and all these things, and chapter 7 how you can survey and observation techniques, and then chapter 8 introduces to various dimensions of experimentation, which also leads to data collection. Chapter 9 focuses on fieldwork and data preparation process. Okay, so these chapters would be dealing with these elements in detail. In step 7, data preparation and data entry. After fieldwork, the data that you have collected would be raw in nature. A lot of data would be missing or erroneously collected, so you have to cleanse the data. Data auditing would be taking place. Okay, and then after the data is cleansed, audited and prepared, what you have to do is you have to do the data entry onto the required software. Okay, in chapter 9 we would discuss data preparation in quite detail. Then step 8 is data analysis. Here obviously you are doing a lot of data analysis using sophisticated statistical tools. Maybe we would be using SPSS, okay, which has all embedded tools like univariate statistical analysis, bivariate statistical analysis, multivariate statistical analysis. So a lot of stuff would be there on SPSS, and using SPSS we can solve a lot of problems. Okay, that this is just the beginning. As we keep moving ahead, we will require that software quite a bit. Okay, I'll be using SPSS 20, the version 20. You can download that. Okay, so you can use it. Then step 9, that is interpretation of results and presentation of findings. So how do you interpret the results that you have obtained from your analysis? You have used SPSS, it has blurted out some output. Now how do you understand that? So understanding your outputs from the analysis is the most important step, I believe. Okay, because if you are not adept in analyzing and interpreting, the entire exercise would end up futile. So you need to have a rich statistical understanding of various tools and techniques to make better and educated interpretations. And the 10th step is management decision and implementation, right? So as I told you earlier also, as a researcher, you can just give your inputs, you can just give your suggestions, but it's the end decision maker who takes the decision. He may listen to your decision, he may follow by your research, but he has the autonomy to take his own decisions. Okay, so you can get in touch with me. You can follow me on LinkedIn, on Facebook and Twitter. You can write to me directly at rajeshdourbala.com. Thank you for listening to me. We'll meet soon.